right, so we've talked about sleep and dreaming, and that is a really fertile area of research where we can look at, well, what is the human brain doing when we have different levels of awareness, when we have different levels of self-perceived agency, when we're having different vividness of experiences. But it's not the only area, and recently there's been a resurgence of research around psychedelics. So psychedelic drugs also alter our perception, alter our experience of a self. People who are on high doses of psychedelic drugs such as psilocybin or LSD can experience what's called as ego death, where they no longer even think there is an I. So we have a video that's going to summarize what are scientists learning, not in the sleep lab, but in the psychedelic lab. Let's go to that video now.
How do these psychedelics work? Well, the honest answer is we don't entirely know, but we know a few things. One is they fit a certain receptor site, the serotonin 5-2A receptor. And they look a lot like serotonin if you look at the molecular models of them. And in fact, LSD fits that receptor site even better than serotonin does, and it stays there longer, and that's why the LSD trip can last 12 hours. What happens after that, we don't really know. It's an agonist to that receptor, so it increases its activity. And this, the neuroscientists say, lead to a cascade of effects, which is shorthand for don't really know what happens next. But one thing we do know, or we think we know, is that it appears that one particular brain network is deactivated or quieted, and that is the default mode network. This was discovered not very long ago by a researcher in England named Robin Carhart Harris, who was dosing people with psilocybin and LSD and then sliding them into an MRI machine to take an fMRI, a functional magnetic resonance image. The expectation, I think, was that people would see an excitation of many, many different networks in the brain. That's what the kind of mental fireworks sort of foretold. But he was very surprised to discover that one particular network was downregulated, and that was this default mode network. So what is that? Well, it's a tightly linked set of structures connecting the prefrontal cortex to the posterior cingulate cortex to deeper, older centers of emotion and memory. It appears to be involved in things like self-reflection, theory of mind, the ability to impute mental states to others, mental time travel, the ability to project forward in time and back, which is central to creating an identity, right? You don't have an identity without a memory. And the so-called autobiographical memory, the function by which we construct the story of who we are by taking the things that happen to us and folding them into that narrative. And that appears to take place in the posterior cingulate cortex. So, to the extent the ego can be said to have a location in the brain, it appears to be this, the default mode network. It's active when you're doing nothing, when your mind is wandering. It can be very self-critical. It's where self-talk takes place. And that goes quiet. And when that goes quiet, the brain is sort of, as one of the neuroscientists put it, let off the leash, because those ego functions, that self idea, is a regulator of all mental activity. And kind of the brain is a hierarchical system, and the default mode network appears to be at the top. It's kind of the orchestra conductor or corporate executive. And you take that out of the picture, and suddenly you have this uprising from other parts of the brain, and you have networks that don't ordinarily communicate with one another suddenly striking up conversations. So you might have the visual cortex talking to the auditory cortex, the auditory system, and suddenly you're seeing music. Or it becomes palpable. You can feel it or smell it, synesthesia. So you have this temporary rewiring in the brain in the absence of the control of the regulator. And this appears to have a beneficial effect in terms of jogging the brain out of bad patterns.
So I find this fascinating because it really, I think, changes our sense of that there's a normal consciousness, which we can take for granted. And then what we're interested in is what's changing in the brain when we're sleeping, or what's changing in the brain when we're dreaming. But in this case, it's like, well, what's happening in the brain to manufacture that sense of ourselves that we walk through life with, which is like, you know, I'm an I and my name's Paige, and this is the kind of the little pitter patter chatter that's going in my head all the time. And what else could be manufactured by our brains if that's quiescent?